Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you for stopping by to watch. So in the last 48 hours, do you know that 7 U.S. bases and or troops in the Middle East have been attacked by foreign forces? Drones, rockets, missiles, coming from Syria and probably Lebanon and probably Iran. It's been happening. There's been several incidents where drones or rockets have been fired at U.S. bases. So it's like they're trying to, who knows, some third party that we don't know the actual title of, is trying to get the United States involved in all of this. That's kind of become obvious if you start to look at how everything is being played out with all the massive amounts of troops, naval ships being put into the area, planes, everything else. Russia's making threats, so it's getting to that point that I think that we're trying to get involved in this. Gaza, the aid going into Gaza has been delayed another couple of days. I think that there's a purpose for this. I think we're probably watching, at least right now in this moment, a war of attrition being played. Israel probably doesn't want to, they know if they go into Gaza and there's a lot higher civilian casualties, it's not going to look well for them on a global stage. So I think they're trying to forcibly drive them into southern Gaza, where the aid might be. I don't know. It's just a thought, right? There's been a global travel warning issued by the United States for U.S. citizens. That there's a heightened amount of chatter and possible attacks and threats. And this travel advisory actually is for here in the United States, that we should also be, on edge because things are happening. Last night, the guy that plays Joe Biden, he spoke at the White House or a Hollywood set, I don't know. It didn't look like his face was falling off of him, at least last night. But he said a bunch of words, and basically he talked about how we have to go into debt another at least $100 billion or more to send money to Ukraine, to send money to Israel, to send money to Taiwan, all this kind of stuff. We need to write more blank checks. And that was the big thing, I think, personally, because if you watched it last night or listened to it, he was emphasizing on the need for the United States to stick with all of these things because it's in our best interest. Now, I disagree with that. Most of you probably do also. But what I believe last night's speech was about wasn't so much announcing that, we're going to be spending a bunch of money, because we've been spending money in Ukraine for over a year now, and there's not been any big presidential addresses over that. What I think was going on is that he was conditioning the American people so that at a later date, when U.S. forces are involved more directly in all of this, and very possibly there's the need of a draft, he's already conditioning the American public that how severe this war is and why we have to stick with it. So that's kind of my opinion of that. I think that this is moving along at a pretty fast pace, okay? I know that some of you are already saying, well, why hasn't it happened yet? It's been 2 weeks, and we've been hearing about a ground war for a week, and nothing's happened. We've got all these troops that are building up. Believe that's for a purpose, and if you look at the grand scheme of things, this is being moved at a pretty rapid pace. And I think that we have to understand that the road that we're going down, I don't know that it's going to change, at least anytime too soon. So I think that, I think we're going to see more intense conflict in the region, and it's just going to spread around the world. Back here on the home front, Jerome Powell, if you don't know who that guy is, he's the head of the Federal Reserve. He's the one that controls all your money. He's not really a government employee, and the Federal Reserve isn't government. It's this private bank. But anyways, he's been talking a lot about how inflation is too high. Inflation is still too high. We got to get it down. And remember, that the number that they tell you that inflation is right now is, number one, it's a lie, and number two, they kind of manipulate and twist things to make you think that it's lower. So they tell you the inflation rate today, whatever that rate is, and that rate is based on a year over year. Now, they eliminate a lot of very important items in the average person's daily shopping, and so that keeps the rate low also. But it's a year over year, and so inflation was high last year, okay? Inflation was high the year before. And so today's rate is just based on how much it's gone up since last year, okay? Which meaning if you already had 8% inflation last year and you go up another 3 or 4%, well, now your total inflation over the last couple of years is like 12%. And if you had another 5 or 6% from the year previous, you're getting into the 20% inflation. So since 2020, our inflation is about 20% increase. You're paying at minimum, on average, 20% more for stuff since 2020 in the last 3 years. So inflation's much, much higher than they're telling you. They're spinning this tale that's not true. But anyways, it's been saying that inflation is still too high and they need to do something about it. Last week, I mentioned yesterday that last week the IMF said that the United States debt is unsustainable. So while all this stuff is going on in the Middle East and it's distracting all of the people around the world, because it is a big deal, there's stuff going on here in the home front when it comes to numbers, when it comes to your money. Mortgage rates continually are skyrocketing. The housing bubble, it's kind of sort of bursting, but a lot of experts believe that it's going to become more stagnant and not really crash, meaning that the prices of homes and values will probably still stay high. There'll just be a whole lot less of people actually purchasing, so there will be very little market movement. Treasury bills, things like that, the numbers are going up. Oil prices, numbers are going up. Gold and silver, they're going back up. If you didn't buy in the last few weeks, then you kind of missed a little bottom there, because both of those kind of dropped for a while. All of this is happening while we're building ourselves to go to war with, at least it looks like, potentially multiple people. And the whole economic stuff is not being talked about. And it's critical. It's critical. I could easily, and I'm not making a prediction, okay? I'm just saying I could easily see a scenario that over the next 6 to 12 months, we get ourselves involved into a majorly heated war. We need to fund that. I mean, look at it this way. If we're calling for another $100 billion to just give to someone to fight a war, how much more money are we going to need if we're also involved in that? So we're giving money and stuff to the Israelis and to the Ukrainians and over in Taiwan, and then we're also fighting side by side, okay? So we're talking like a lot more than just $100 billion is going to be needed to do that. So the outlook of the United States spending potentially trillions over the next 6 to 12 months, 18 months, just when it comes to the global affairs, I don't think that that's outrageous, really. I mean, at least hundreds of billions at the very minimal. And could it top $1 trillion or more? Very likely. And so in this scenario that I'm fictitiously creating, I could easily see it possible that somewhere in the middle of it, when people are very distracted, they crash the US dollar and very rapidly bring about a digital currency. You know, you go to bed on a Friday night, over the weekend the US dollar collapses, and by Monday morning you have a central bank digital currency. So there's not too much of a hiccup, and there's not enough time for people to really truly panic, and we say this is the best way. We've run out of money, we've run out of credit. The US's credit rating keeps going down. They're considering it again right now. Just recently they lowered the US's credit rating, and they're right now considering lowering it again. So this would be perfect, folks. You know, you're distracted with the war, the US dollar collapses. There's not really a whole lot of panic in the streets because, you know, that, and we just, next Monday morning, you wake up and they say, hey, you need to go down to your local bank or wherever and turn in all your currency, and we'll switch it over to digital for you. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying that some kind of sort of possible maybe scenario like that could easily happen, because here we are at the, I mean, our economy, our currency and everything is just kind of hanging on by a thread. And then we're going into very potential multiple wars or a big global war that's going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars. How are we going to do that, right? How are we going to do that? I mean, there's no real good answer to it. And we all know that they desperately, desperately need that central bank digital currency. And so as much as all this stuff that's happening in the world where, you know, Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan and these other places where there's wars and there's people dying, that's tragic. It certainly is. But don't forget that there's other major things going on in the economy, and the US dollar and all that kind of stuff is happening. This whole Middle East stuff with Israel and us and everyone else is going to push de-dollarization even more. It's going to kind of force the hand of BRICS and all the BRICS supporters to switch over to the yuan or something like that, to walk away from the US dollar, because they've already been saying that. They've already been saying, you know, Saudi Arabia has been the biggest one. They've been talking very loudly about, you know, ditching the US dollar. China has been dumping US bonds in mass. I think last month was the largest month yet of how much US dollars that they dumped. And so we're going to see that happen also. We're going to see more de-dollarization happen. It probably won't be front page of the news. That's the beauty of being involved in war, is that the media and the government and the politicians can just focus on the war, which instills emotionally, you know, effects of the people, and then behind the scenes that they can do all of these other things that you never know about. So I suspect that's going to be happening, which is just going to fuel what I just said about switching over to central bank digital currency. There's a lot of stuff happening. I think this is also very important too, this economy, financial, because it's exactly in line with the Agenda 2030. We know it's going to happen. If the vast majority of the world, something like 90% of all the world's nations, have jumped on board central bank digital currencies, you know the United States is going to have to at some point. I don't agree with it. I don't want it, but they have to stay relevant. It doesn't matter what you or the politicians think. It's that they have to stay relevant. And so it's going to happen sooner or later. And I suspect as this war builds, it's going to present a perfect opportunity for that. Folks, you need to be stocking up. You need to be praying up. You need to be training and planning and going over your stuff. It's important. Things are already starting to fly off the shelves in certain areas. I've talked to people about things like propane and stuff. We don't have big propane tanks. We burn wood, but it's all those prices are going up. And plus, with winter coming on, it's going to make them go up naturally anyways. We're going to see the availability of stuff. If you store fuel like gasoline, diesel, you should probably make sure you're topped off on that, because those prices are shooting up and going to go up even further. I mean, it's almost inevitable that we're going to see over $100 a barrel by the end of this year. We're already in the 90s. So just be smart, folks. Be stocking up, be getting ready, be training, be planning, having regular meetings if you're part of a mag. None of this once a month having a little coffee dinner. Do it on a regular basis, once a week at least, because things are starting to get to that point that decisions may have to be made by some people of, you know, do we pull out? Do we close up shop? Do we lock ourselves in? Do we head to the hills? Whatever it is. We may be getting close to that point. You need to be getting your houses in order and preparing mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.